Tenarbing asks, do you think that Buffy the Vampire Slayer ignores Willow's bisexuality, considering that in the earlier seasons of the show, Willow had a crush on Xander and then later dated Oz for a while, followed by the later seasons where she discovers her homosexuality and dates Tara? From then on out, the characters in the show all refer to her as a lesbian, not a bisexual. I answer, yes, definitely. Joss Whedon and the other writers do not understand bisexuality. They seem to think that people can go to college and turn gay. The scenes with Vampire Willow in Season 3 Episode 9 The Wish and Season 3 Episode 16 Doppelgangland really put forward the idea that Willow could be interested in both boys and girls. Vampire Willow puts her hands all over Xander, threatens to rape her human counterpart, and she and Vampire Xander both sensually fang-rape Cordelia. Human Willow calls her kinda gay. Buffy reassures her that vampires have nothing in common with the people they were, which is sort of the pre-Angel dynamic, where Joss just wanted vampires as problems that teenagers can defeat, and then Angel says, well, actually, as a funny line just thrown out there, leaving the suggestion that Willow could be kinda gay, but not following up on it. Vampire Willow gropes her after that, while she just wants to be friends, so it could be interpreted that only the vampire is kinda gay. Then Season 4 has Willow falling in love with Tara, and it could be interpreted as her living up to that suggestion, but it's not handled as Willow discovering that she is attracted to both men and women, so much as her becoming a lesbian, because that's what happens to women who experiment in college. In Season 5, Episode 11 Triangle, she says she's gay now, and in Season 6, Episode 20 Villains, she says bored now, while being sadistic, which implies that Vampire Willow's personality is there in her, but without the being attracted to Xander part. Later in Season 7, Episode 13, The Killer in Me, they tried to clean up their act by having Kennedy act like a real lesbian and kind of retconning Willow into one by having them talk about realizing their sexualities. It's a mess. In fact, I made a video about it, way back in 2010. Biphobia and Gay-Friendly Media. It's pretty crappy. I didn't know how to make videos then. The show's crappy with bisexuality depictions across the board. Willow gets center focus, of course, but there are other bi-coded characters. Angel is implied to have had a thing with Penn and Spike, at least one time with Spike.
Angel and me have never been intimate, except that one.
Giles is implied to have participated in an orgy with 4 other guys and 1 woman. Warren is implied to have slept with Andrew. Andrew openly lusted after Gillian Anderson, but now they say he's gay. They never make it clear who Lorne is attracted to, but he flirts with both Cordelia and Angel, and his actor Andy Hallett said that the character was pansexual. Jane Espenson says that she got Joss to agree that Buffy and Faith had lesbian subtext when they were making Season 3, and then Buffy out and out sleeps with Satsu in the comics, and they still won't say that these characters are bi. To take it further, lesbian characters are the only ones who get remotely decent representation. It took them forever to admit that Andrew is gay. Larry is a punchline, and their big gay character in the comics, Billy the Vampire Slayer, reads more like a trans woman than a gay man. Not that I imagine we'll get a trans character, as Joss's various bad jokes demonstrate that he doesn't have a lot of respect for trans folks. So it's less of an LGBT-friendly show as it is L-friendly, and sometimes not even that. Goliath 100 says, "You have trolls?" I answer, "Not as much as I used to. I've been swinging the banhammer more liberally, and that's cleaned up my comment sections. I try to keep them controlled. Get it? Get it? Moving on." Inaharnia asks, how do you analyze the books you read and the movies and TV shows you watch? Do you read other reviews about them? Have you learned how to analyze via lessons? I answer, well, I consume a lot of media, so I become very familiar with the tropes and storytelling methods. I take note of who made the media items, what their backgrounds or politics are, and what previous things they worked on. If a specific item is a remake or adaptation of something, I try to become familiar with that so I can compare the two. I examine the tropes used and see if there are any interesting ways they are used that would make them hold a different value than most items with the same tropes. I look at the prominence of male presence versus female, and also things like race and appearance, and see if anything is being said about that or if it's just the storyteller's biases coming out. If it's a visual piece like a film, I look at the use of colors through makeup and film timing to see if they fire up the female skin pigments, as might be done to draw an objectifying male gaze. and compare it to the male characters. I mentally run through my general thoughts on the subject, sometimes aided by a hot shower or exercise. And then, yes, I do research by examining others' reviews. With Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there is a ton of reviews out there to check out. I particularly like checking out all things philosophical on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel the series. But there's some stuff just so obscure or just passed on by feminists that I have to go in from scratch. At that point, I start writing it down. I usually do a revision before recording, and then end up catching things in the editing phase that I need to revise before uploading. And no, I didn't learn from lessons. I have taken classes that have said similar things on what to do, but I figured it out on my own. I read some analyses online, and the ones I disagreed with inspired me to come up with ways to conduct my own analyses and present a rebuttal. I want to say I was motivated especially from reading a Freudian analysis claiming that someone's gun was a phallic symbol. Unless someone from the production indicates that something is supposed to be a phallic symbol, or it's just really overt, I'm going to assume that the Freudians are full of it. I always wish I could get a teacher who's into sociopolitical analysis the way I am, but no luck so far. Inaharnia asks again, I think I remember seeing somewhere that you are autistic. If you are, can you please do a video or series of videos analyzing the representations of autistic characters in media? I would love that. I answer, yeah, I guess I could. It would probably take a while though. I've got a lot of plans already, and both school and personal life tends to get in the way of video making. Otherwise I'd have far more videos going up anyway. I could always put it on a list though. Captain Andy asks, what kind of music do you like? I answer, I'm good with most music. My parents control the radio station, so I don't get a lot of exposure to music other than rock produced in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But I find I can get into pretty much whatever. Maybe bluegrass and yodeling a little less, but not as much as people tend to make fun of them. According to iTunes, I mostly listen to Voltaire, David Garrett, Blue Oyster Cult, Queen, Vixie and Tony, Echo and the Bunnymen, Elton John, 3 Days Grace, and the soundtracks of Broadway plays Aida and Little Shop of Horrors. Druid City Comic asks, do you have any favorites to talk about in regards to Western comic books or graphic novels? Anything from the same category so bad and awful that you'd rather talk about it instead? I answer, yes, from the first question. The Legend of Bold Riley by Leah Wethington. It's a story set in a fantasy world in a region based off of India about a princess who decides that the princess life isn't for her and goes out adventuring. It's a lot more mature than most princess stories because there's a nod to the serious duty of ruling a kingdom and how she has to sacrifice her political power in order to choose this life. The title is accurate because it feels a lot like a legend, crafted over decades of oral storytelling, to the point that it loses an element of realism, but you can just go with it because that's what legends are like. As Bold Riley, she rescues people and fights monsters and befriends magical creatures. The standard hero stuff. Bold Riley also loves the company of women the way that you would expect of any male hero, accepting sex as payment for things, and getting in trouble because the blood flows away from her brain. The fact that she's a lesbian is woven so well into the story that it doesn't feel like it's specifically for a gay genre, just that sometimes heroes can be women who like women. It's probably the best effort I've seen at making a female version of a standard male fantasy hero. I highly recommend it. And I haven't really read any bad comics. I typically only read what people recommend. Serpen Thrope asks, what are your main and secondary criteria when you decide what to analyze? I answer, can I understand it? And can I stand it? I need to be able to understand the media in order to properly analyze it. Maybe the ideas it discusses are highly intellectual, and I would not have the necessary philosophical or scientific grounding to properly dissect it. Many of the flawed feminist criticisms of Dollhouse resulted from an inability to understand the conceptions of identity used in the fiction. I would not want to commit a similar blunder, or maybe it's from a culture or subculture with which I do not have the necessary knowledge and experience, like Japan. I previously attempted to make a feminist analysis of the anime series Higurashi no Naku Koro ni, and it turned out fraught with errors, because I just did not have the necessary cultural grounding to understand the context, or when something is progressive or regressive. Japanese culture is so different that I can't really understand anything produced by Japanese for Japanese, and I have to leave that for the Japanese feminist to analyze. It's important to recognize one's own fallibility. And then there are some things that I can understand but just can't stand. If it's boring like the comedic version of Casino Royale, or just has a weird art style that gets on my nerves, I don't want to sit through it. Even if Dragon Ball Z weren't Japanese, I wouldn't be able to sit through it. There's just something about that macho art style that just gets on my nerves. I also hate the weird, boneless animation in Adventure Time. People keep saying that the show is good, but I can't stand the noodle arms. What, did Jake the dog and Finn the human visit the enigma of Amigara Fault or something? And the pseudo-realism of the stop-motion in Fantastic Mr. Fox leaves me literally feeling like I'm gonna throw up. There's just something uncanny, Valley-esque about it, ugh. And even if I can get through all the Halo reviews, I'm never going to review marathon games. Certain first-person video games don't get the motion right and leave me with an awful headache. Some things are just not practical to review. Extremely Boring asks, are you going to review Scream Queens? I answer, yeah, eventually. I've seen a few episodes. My impression so far is that it's comparable to The Godfather in that it's about awful people, but you can get into the story and appreciate the characters for what they bring to the plot. They say and do horrible things, but these lines and inclusions are not objectionable in and of themselves because of the overarching premise that pretty much everyone on screen is completely unsympathetic. With that established, we can appreciate the high female presence, and the general plot is a fun, campy homage to horror films. Baby K 1985 asks, what feminist readings impacted you the most? What would you recommend to someone wanting to learn more about feminism? I answer, good question. I haven't really read a lot of feminist books. I've read a lot of blog posts. I don't agree with it all the time, but I think the blog This Ain't Livin' was rather impactful, as well as the blog Feministe, not sure on the pronunciation, that's feminist with an E at the end. Aside from that, I just read a lot of feminist blogs and tweets. I'd say to just go out there and subscribe to a lot of feeds of a lot of different feminists, especially ones who disagree with each other. Outside of actual writing, I was influenced a lot by Joss Whedon's Equality Now speech, in which he describes various things he's thought of saying in response to questions about why he writes strong female characters. It got me thinking about the feminist movement, and I started analyzing the feminist themes in his works. Also, I found a lecture from Robert Jensen on gender roles to be rather brilliant and got me thinking. Robert Jensen is controversial because he's a transphobic second-wave radical feminist, but I find his general discussions of gender to be relevant. I'd recommend his works with caution. I'd recommend Jessica Valenti's books Full Frontal Feminism and Yes Means Yes. I've read sections of those, but not all the way through. They seem pretty good. I haven't really looked at her other books, but I've heard generally positive things about them too. The criticisms only really apply at a certain level deep in feminist philosophy, and shouldn't really impact newcomers. The books strike me as good introductions to popular feminist ideas. The videos made by Feminist Frequency are also generally good introductions to feminist ideas. I obviously don't agree with everything, but the Tropes vs. Women videos are generally good. I'd avoid her earlier stuff. The quality is lesser. And for a more general audience, I'd recommend the podcast Stuff Mom Never Told You. A lot of fascinating history in there. John Cromwell asks, have you ever read A Comedy of Customs by Robert Heinlein? Have you read anything by him at all, for that matter? I answer, no, I have not. However, I have read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, some of his short stories, and Spider Robinson's Variable Star, based on his outline. He puts forward some interesting ideas and has likable characters. I like Mycroft. I like his embrace of polyandry in the Loony Society, and I like his generally subversive outlook. He just tends to be very reflective of his era, with the misogyny there present. I've heard this alternatively blamed on him, his editor, or his medical condition driving him insane. I don't know where it comes from, but it hampers my enjoyment of his works. Looking at the Comedy of Customs book on Wikipedia, it seems like it's gotten some positive feminist attention. It's possible that because it's such an early work for him, it was made before his problematic writing period. However, I also see speculation that he was inspired by Ayn Rand, so I would be hesitant to label it as feminist prematurely. Ayn Rand was an anti-feminist who used these strong, effective heroines as devices for exploring her philosophies. And part of that involves the characters rejecting men weaker than them and finding men worthy of dominating them, because that is a woman's natural place. It's certainly possible that Heinlein only grabbed the good parts from Rand and improved upon them. The Atlas Shrugged movie adaptations, were honestly pretty good from a feminist perspective, because you had the strong, effective Randian heroine, meeting modern feminist expectations as was necessary to get people to accept a story written in the 50s takes place in the near future. It's possible that Heinlein broke new ground in being inspired by Rand, but I find it questionable to say the least. Of course, I haven't read it. Youth Culture Forever asks, have you seen Gone Girl? If so, what did you think? And will you ever do a review of it? I answer, I have seen Gone Girl. I probably won't do a review of it because it's not very high on my list of priorities. I generally like to focus on Buffy for now. I thought it was a good domestic drama horror film, and it's nice seeing something high quality and well regarded from a genre usually disrespected as for low quality feminine appeal. Like you would typically see this kind of thing as a Lifetime film. The plot is the kind of thing that we should be comfortable depicting because it does happen. There are evil sociopathic women out there, and their tricks should be talked about. But we should avoid generalizations that imply that it happens more frequently than the general trends, in which men take advantage of women and cast women as the ones to be suspicious of. The execution of Gone Girl is somewhat flawed for placing sympathy and suspicion in places inappropriate for general worldviews. At the same time, though, it's disingenuous to say that this kind of thing doesn't happen. Feminist criticism of Gone Girl as it being just some kind of misogynistic fantasy is misplaced. That's not how we should be approaching Gone Girl. I don't think that the author is misogynistic, because she also wrote a short story, What Do You Do?, present in the book Rogues, edited by George R.R. Martin. What Do You Do? Uses a similar mastermind psychopath trope with a woman and or her teenage son. And it's all just using cultural assumptions of weakness based on gender and age to make a twist where the villain comes from a place that you wouldn't expect. Please see my videos on folkloric psychopathy and male rape in Buffy/Ringer for related discussion. Skull Queen of Gloom asks, have you ever seen a British sci-fi comedy drama by the name of Misfits? It aired around the early 2010s and was pretty popular in its first few seasons. It's kinda like Buffy in the sense that it's meant to poke fun at its genre, is quite character-driven, and has a persistent sense of humor. I think it's worth a bit of inspection if you haven't seen it. I answer, I have not seen it. I live in the United States, and for the most part, British shows are off my radar. I will, however, add it to my Netflix queue to watch in the future. Miss Kayri asks, any good BDSM entertainment media, books, movies, etc., that you can recommend? I answer, I can definitely recommend Sunstone, a graphic novel made by Witchblade artist Stjepan Shinies, which is available for free on DeviantArt. It's a slice-of-life drama centering on a lesbian romance, with some hetero couples in the secondary plot. It started as a series of loosely related pinup drawings, but it evolved into a really emotional, sweet, and touching story about these two women with a BDSM relationship. The art is gorgeous, and though the characters are drawn to be sexy, they're not the kind of unrealistic sexual objects featured in many graphic novels. This is the rare male author who understands women and can depict sexy women as respectfully as the best lesbian authors. Highly recommended. After that, I recommend the long-running comedic fantasy romance series Tales of MU by Alexandra Aaron, available for free online, talesofmu.com. It's a college drama about a masochistic, half-demon girl attending a bigoted university where non-humans get the short end of the stick. It's a metaphorical story about fighting racism set in a modern fantasy world, with plenty of geeky references and jokes about fantasy fiction. It's about this sheltered young woman becoming comfortable with her sexuality as she enters into a polyamorous relationship with a nymph who views sexuality as the purest form of interaction, a sexually sadistic half-elf trans woman, and a human boy with some internalized bigotry he has to get over. And it's also about her trying to understand and control her demon side as she learns more about the evil in the world and tries to protect her friends from it. It's about as long and detailed as A Song of Ice and Fire, just on the smaller focus of the college. Also highly recommended. Of course, there's Naruto Kaoru, which I've made videos about in the past. I love the manga and its spin-off manga. The first live-action movie is among my favorite movies altogether. The second live-action movie and the anime, though, they turn good characters into creeps and miss the point of the manga. Your mileage may vary. The film's Secretary is pretty good, if problematic. When I felt isolated as the only masochist in my limited social structure, this film offered me a sense of validation. I could see myself in the masochistic protagonist, and I felt more like a real person. The film does a good job of depicting a BDSM relationship in a positive light, and it even has a happy ending. It's just problematic in that it doesn't have anything wrong with what amounts to workplace sexual harassment. I wouldn't mind so much if it committed to being a wacky, over-the-top comedy, as it seemingly wants to be, but it also seems to think it's a serious artistic drama about human emotion. I like it, but your mileage may vary. Miss Carey again asks, "What's your favorite anime?" I answer, "Hard question, but I would have to say Higurashi no Nakukoro ni, When They Cry. It's a horror series about a group of teenagers in a small town that has secrets and creepy rituals. The kids appear to be good friends. They play kinky, sexually charged games on the order of Truth or Dare, each trying to one-up each other, and they seem to generally get along. There's then a murder, and a detective starts looking into the group of friends, finding them suspicious. Things go south and end horribly. And then the story starts again. Same setting, same characters, but different events prompting different responses, with only the murder remaining a constant. Again, things go south, and it starts over with a different focus. Each time, the viewer learns a little more about the setting and the characters, and can work on solving that murder mystery, even if the characters themselves don't have all of the facts. By the end, everything comes together in an awesome way that makes you delight in these characters. This is the kind of anime you show friends who claim that a cartoon can't be scary. It is a well-done horror series with a very cinematic feel. You can tell that the animators watched a lot of horror films to really nail down the look of the camera angles and understand how it makes the viewer feel. If you're interested in making horror fiction at all, I recommend analyzing the storytelling of Higurashi no Nakukoro ni. It is that good. If you're not a fan of horror, give this a wide berth. It will give you nightmares. If you're a fan of horror, though, I highly recommend it. Just make sure you watch it in the right order. Even though the different segments tell different stories, you can't just pick and choose the order. Each of the segments builds off of the previous segments, giving you answers to previous questions, and surprising you based off of prior expectations. It is all paced in a very specific way, and you get explanations for the mysteries just when it fits the pacing, so to watch it out of order would definitely spoil twists. Unfortunately, you can't buy an American DVD set legitimately anymore, but there is a Malaysian bootleg thing on eBay, and there's always streaming from anime sites. Miss Carey again asks, "What do you do for a living? Or if you're studying, what are you majoring in?" I answer, "I'm in a bachelor's program with the intent to go into video production. All of the effort I put into making feminist videos gave me practice with the software, and I realized that doing that for a living would be enjoyable and relatively easy. That means that this YouTube series isn't just a hobby, it's practice for a future career. How cool is that?" Chris Dethlefsen asks, "Have you read/seen Shingeki no Kyojin, Attack on Titan? And if so, what do you think of it from a feminist standpoint?" I answer, "I have not seen or read it. I know some people in my class like it. Unfortunately, I couldn't analyze it anyway because I'm not Japanese and could never have the cultural knowledge necessary to fully understand its context. As discussed, before deciding to analyze something, I have to make sure I can understand it, and I think I can't." Youth Culture Forever asks, "Have you ever looked at Marxist feminism?" And then there's a link to about 8 hours worth of videos on the subject. I watched about an hour of it. Don't do this in the future. It really slows things down. I think I got the gist anyway. Anyway, I answer, I'm not a Marxist. I'm aware of Marxist feminism. I follow a lot of Marxist feminists online. I think they're lovely people who care a lot about helping people. I think I can understand the general philosophies involved, and I could see how they could be used to help people, but I disagree about some of the defining premises. Ida Avotina asks, "Hi, I don't remember if you mentioned this before, but how did you become a feminist? Did it happen overnight or more gradually? How you examined your beliefs, etc.? I answer, I think I had feminist thoughts at a very young age. My parents tried to raise me gender neutrally, but they still enforced gender norms, and I was pretty upset about being denied certain things based on gender roles. Around age 6, I discovered inequality with regard to whom that the local Boy Scouts knockoff recruited and whom they didn't. And I started noticing all kinds of other gender problems in the world. I was attracted to characters like Yvette from Smart Guy, who is supposed to be a feminist even though people who don't understand feminism enough to depict it accurately probably were behind her. I was attracted to stories that are described as feminist, like Tamora Pierce's Tortall series, or Patricia C. Reed's Enchanted Forest Chronicles. Once I got into Buffy the Vampire Slayer and heard Joss Whedon calling himself a feminist and actively preaching it, I went looking for feminist literature and fell in love with feminism. Actually calling myself a feminist came from misogynists just labeling me as one when I started preaching feminism, and it seemed simpler to use that label than feminist supporter or whatever. Thanks for your questions.